let's get started. First thing is a disclaimer. This is just information that we've gathered over 18 years. So we're realtors. So I'm not a CPA, and I'm not an accountant, and I'm not a trust attorney, and I don't play one on TV. Okay? So just know that this is just experience that we've learned, and we've actually vetted this information from attorneys that we use. Okay? So I am not an attorney. All right, so what we're going to cover today, like, what is a trust? What is a trust? We're going to talk about that. By the way, how many of you have a trust? Awesome. How many of you are a trustee? Wow, congratulations. More than just your own trust. Somebody else's trust? Wow, okay, great. This is what we're seeing is we're in the largest transition of wealth in America. Baby boomers and our parents are passing on. What happens in that case? One of us will become a trustee of our parents likely, right? A successor trustee. And the problem though is, the reason why we have this class is there was never a class to teach people what their job was. And so you show up one day, somebody passes away, and you go, I'm a what now? I'm a trustee. What is that? Like, what do I do? What's my job? Because nobody told us that, right? So the wise person, the older person, goes to the attorney and says, I want to put everything in a trust, keeps it safe from probate. And they say, okay, this is the most responsible person here. We'll name that person the trustee, right? Typically how it goes. But then they never train that person what to do. So today we're going to talk about the roles, the duties, and the responsibilities of a trustee, right? We're going to talk about there's 21 responsibilities as a trustee you need to know that you're going to be required to go through at some point. And that the reason why also we started doing this class is people would call us and say, hey, Dan, I want to sell my house, but I don't know what my job is. And so we had to do research. And for decades, we started studying all of these processes and requirements, and we came up with this list that we vetted through attorneys, trust attorney. What is a real estate planner? We're going to talk about that. As Ryan mentioned earlier, I run a community of real estate agents around the country. There's over 400 of these agents that I train every week, twice a week, to teach them how to help build, protect, and transfer wealth in real estate, okay? We're gonna end up, how do you prevent family disputes? Anybody heard of a family fight over real estate after mom and dad died? Yeah, that happens all the time, right? Well, why does that happen? Anybody? Anyone want to guess? Why are there fights after mom and dad die? Money? Oftentimes money. It's actually not the money, it's real estate. See, because they can divide cash, can't they? To the penny, they can divide cash. So there's really a fight on cash. Where's the fight? On real estate. Why is that the case? Because you can't divide real estate, right? And there's people that don't plan. What happens is you put your property in a trust and it keeps it safe from probate, and that's a good thing, right? You want to do that, but does it keep it safe from your family? And so that's why the real estate planner was birthed, because the world does a good enough job breaking our families apart. Would you agree? The world does a good job breaking our families apart. And what our goal and our platform around the country is keeping families together with a plan so that they can create generational wealth and minimize taxes and prevent family disputes. Okay, so that's what we're going to talk about today. So what is a trust? It's a fiduciary responsibility relationship where one party, the grantor, which typically is the guy who owns it, gives a second party, the trustee, right, the right to hold and direct the property and its assets for the benefit of the last person, the beneficiary. So you have three parties, right? You have the trustor, you have the trustee, and you have the beneficiary. While people are alive, like I'm the trustee of my trust, right? But when I'm gone, somebody else is going to be the trustee of my trust, right? The beneficiaries are still, I can be my own beneficiary of my own trust because I can make decisions of what I want to do with my wealth, right? But when I pass on, there will be a beneficiary to that. And it's really, if you think about it, it's an instruction manual. It's an instruction manual to what do you want the world to know about your wealth and who it goes to, right? So it's an instruction manual about the money and the assets, how they're managed, how they're distributed while they're alive and after you're dead. It's really important because that's what you should be doing with your trust attorney And your trust attorney, if they're really good, they ask you a gazillion questions about you and your family. Well, we kind of do the same thing when we create plans. We're going to ask a lot of questions about you, your properties, your family, what matters most to you. So the trust is going to fall in 6 categories. You have a living trust or a testamentary trust. 98% of the trusts are living trusts. Funded or unfunded, right? And we'll talk about that. And then revocable and irrevocable. So those are the 6 categories. Let's go through those real quick here. So what the trust does is it really, number one, it avoids probate. If you have real estate and it's not in the trust or it's not funded into the trust, then it's going to go through probate. And we're going to talk about that as well. What is probate? It's very costly. How much does it cost? Tens of thousands of dollars on the low side. It could be millions of dollars if there's a case now with a very prominent family here in Hawaii, and that one of our attorney friends is the attorney on, and that case has been going on for 32 years. Think of all the money that's wasted to pay attorneys. Right? There's a lot of litigators out there that make their living on this type of thing, and it's to their benefit that it doesn't finish, does it? We're on a mission to eliminate litigators. We want to remove the litigators from the planet. See, because if you have a good plan, why are you going to litigate, right? Why are people paying attorneys to fight other people? Right now, we have 3 clients that are now talking to each other through attorneys. They can no longer have a conversation together. Every time they need to transfer information or talk to each other, they're spending hundreds of dollars every minute to have that conversation. 2 of those families have a restraining order on the brother. It's funny, it's always a brother. But yeah, this is true. And family disputes have gotten such a big problem that we became known for family dispute resolution. We actually help families get through their disputes. We have 2 families now that we're working on. It's very time consuming. It'll take months. An average, if it's uncontested, you're looking as fast as maybe 4 months, maybe 6 months. If it's a contested one, it could drag on for years, right? Contested and uncontested, if you have a disputing party, it's a contested. If somebody doesn't agree, right, then you have a contested probate, and it's highly stressful, right? The amount of stress that people go through, I mean, that's the stuff that kills us, really. Emotionally, spiritually, physically, it negatively impacts your lifestyle. Right? The worst part is everything you own becomes public. Everything you own, your life becomes public. Nothing is protected from the world. Everything you owe and everything you own will be open and available for any human being that can read to get that information. That's the worst part. All these other things are painful, but the worst part is the lack of privacy. Right? If you have wealth, you don't want people to know where that is, and yeah, that's a problem. So what it'll do, it also protects it from the creditors as well. And it'll dictate the terms of the inheritance for the beneficiaries. As I mentioned earlier, it's an instruction manual. Right? You want to minimize estate taxes, and typically we do that through higher net worth, and we'll talk more about estate taxes, but that's usually done through an irrevocable trust. An irrevocable trust. Most trusts today are revocable trusts. So what are the estate tax exemption limits? This doesn't impact many of us, but it does impact some of us that have wealth. It depends on where that is. So federal tax limits up to 2023 is up to $12.92 million. So if you're transferring up to $12.92 million, there's no tax on estate tax. When it gets over that, it's extensive, 18 to 40%. It's huge. This is why people put it in an irrevocable trust, because it shields it from them adding that to your estate tax. Okay, and at the state level, it's 5.49 per million, so it's not that high. I mean, if you have 4 or 5 properties, yeah, you're going to be over this. You're going to be over this. In Hawaii, depending on what kind of properties you have, that could happen very quickly, right? And that's 10 to 20% tax. So just imagine if you don't have a really good plan, your heirs are going to get a fraction of what you have, right? And how does that help you with generational wealth, right? That's the problem. Right? So again, I would suggest you see your tax attorney, your trust attorney, to handle your situation regarding that. So what's your role as a trustee? Well, you have first role is a fiduciary role, is to act in the best interest of the beneficiaries of the trust, right? And that means you're going to act with loyalty and prudence and care when managing the assets, right? You can't frivolously put it in a risky stock or move it into things that are not in the best interest of the beneficiaries, right? It has to be in the best interest of the beneficiaries. You have a role of an asset manager. You have to manage those assets and protect them, and that's consistent with the instructions of the trust, right? Whatever the best interest is for the beneficiaries. And you have to keep good records, like really, really good records, because you're going to have to file taxes, right? That's a responsibility, right? You're going to have to provide accurate accounting to all the beneficiaries, all of them. So depending on how many there are, you're responsible to report that. And they have a right to ask you, where did the money go? And then communication. You must keep them informed with all the activities of the trust, all the assets, how it's related in regard to the terms of the trust, right? The instructions of it. And a duty of loyalty. It's again always to the best interest. It doesn't matter what you think is best. If they don't believe it's the best, then it's probably not, right? And they get to decide what is the best for their interest, right? And the goal is to avoid conflicts. That's the challenging part, right? When you're a trustee and you've got 6 or 8 people that maybe not agree, that's a challenging job. Right? And the duty of prudence. You have to act in reasonable care, right? You can't take high risks with their assets, and all of their assets that they own, whether it be hard assets or soft assets, right? And duty of impartiality. What that means is you have to treat them all fairly, all equally, regardless if you like them or not. There might be some that are really a pain in the butt and you really don't like them. Suck it up, because this is a duty. This is your responsibility, right? You can't let those emotions get in the way, because you have to act impartially to all beneficiaries. And then the duty of confidentiality. Yeah, you keep all the information private. You can't be posting on Facebook all these things. The world today. Yeah, everything has to stay confidential. Except if it's required by law to disclose something. And duty to follow the trust instructions, or the document itself. That's one of the things that you must do is, number 1, read the document, and number 1, understand what it requires you to, and I would strongly recommend you seek the counsel of the attorney who drafted it if you have any questions, right? And they will help guide you through that process, what your rights and responsibilities will be. So what are those 21 responsibilities that you need to know? Number 1, it starts with death certificates. You need at least 10 to 20 of them. Depending on how many accounts they have, every account will require one. Anything that, oftentimes utilities will require one. Anything that you're going to change, right? So some people may need more than 20, but the average is about 10 to 20. You're going to need to study the trust document and the instructions. And if you have any questions, if anything's not clear, get clarity with contacting the attorney. Okay. The third is the record of accounts, the financial institutions, banks, credit. All these accounts, you have to make a list of them, because what happens typically is the person passes away and they never tell everybody what they have. And you got to be like a forensic scientist to go pull that stuff out, right? You're gonna look for their mail. That's how you start the information, right? Whatever shows up in the mail is typically a statement of some level. And that'll tell you that something's open, right? And And then what you're looking for is that the beneficiaries, if there's any beneficiary designated on the account. Now, if you have a joint account, that's easier because then that person can open it up. If it's only under their name, it's going to be a little bit time consuming to get access to it. You're going to have to validate with the death certificate. The death certificate is provided. The hospital typically names the date of time of death, goes to the morgue, and the morgue is the one that actually initiates the death certificate. And that could take a couple months. It could take 30, 60, 90 days to get the death certificate. Okay. So without that, everything's frozen. Right? A lot of the accounts, if they're not joint accounts, it's going to be frozen. You won't have access to it. And you still have bills to pay, by the way. You got utilities to pay, you got everything to pay. Right? Record of debts. So all the credit card, the mortgages, the car loans, student loans, or any other kind of debt statements, any area of responsibility to repay something. It could be your exercise gym. You could be Planet Fitness now? You can have a $10 monthly fee or something. I don't know. How much is it now, guys? Yeah, $10. Yeah. That person passes away. They don't know. So they're going to still keep charging that person. Right? The insurance policy is really big. Make sure you have a place that you keep these things if you have your trust, right? And you want to make sure your beneficiaries have access to it, right? In the area of life insurance, health insurance, disability, long-term care insurance, in the event that you get sick, if any of us here, how many of you have long-term care insurance, by the way? Just curious. Okay, good. When are you going to know you need it? When you're in the hospital, right? That's the only time, right? And so when you're in the hospital, you're not going to be by your filing cabinet with all your information in it, will you? So who do you call next? Who do you call to help? Who's the first person you're going to call that has access to that? That person, you want to make sure they know the name of the company, they know the phone number, and they know your account, right? Or at least put it in your phone and you can text it to them or something, right? Because they're going to want to, long-term care insurance, there's a 90-day waiting period. So you want to start that time period as soon as possible to get reimbursed for the care. Okay, get some reimbursement. You're going to come out of your pocket, out of your money, and then they reimburse you. That's how the insurance works. If you need 2 of the 6 activities of daily living, okay, if you need any of those 2, and a doctor gives you a note, that note goes into the insurance company, and then they will start the process at least. And it'll take about 90 days to get to you. Right? Let's see. Social Security office. I never thought about that. Calling the Social Security office because there could be a death benefit there. And there's this master list, believe it or not. There's a master list of dead people. It's real. And I didn't know that. There's a master death list, and you want to make sure their name gets there so that the government knows that person is no longer around, and it'll protect some of their assets, I believe. Okay. I'm not sure exactly how the government does this, but once they're on that list, it's a lot safer. And then credit reporting agencies, you want to let them know. I never thought about credit reporting agencies. That person's dead. They're not going to get a loan. But what's going to happen is the bad guys are going to find out that somebody died, and they're going to go and take that person's identity. They're going to pretend they're them. And they're going to start things, right? But if you get to the credit reporting agencies, that's the best way to do it, because if that person wants to get a loan in your name, the credit agency will know that you're gone, and that they'll deny the loan because that person doesn't exist anymore, right? These are things that you never really think of, right? You never think that you need to do these things, but what we learned is it could be very important. Contacting utility companies, from the cable to the telephone to the water, sewer, you got to make sure the utilities are paid, right? Until the property is either rented or sold. On the post office, you want to reroute the mail. You don't want the mail going to the house where the deceased person lived, because if once people know that nobody's living there anymore, they're going to go and take their mail, right? So don't let it land there at all. Get it rerouted to the trustee's or executor's estate address, right? So you know you're not missing any mail. Because what if one day you show up and something important you're waiting for, Now it's no longer there, right? That could be a problem. Contacting government agencies, the VA, Veterans Administration, Homeland Security, if you have that. And then motor vehicle registration, driver's license, ID, license plates, transfer of vehicle registration and ownership, disability placards. Right? There's so many little things that most people just don't remember that's kind of an important thing to do, right? To bring closure, complete closure for this person so that nobody takes that person's identity or uses anything around their name. Contact the employment benefits company. Sometimes there's extra benefits there that haven't been paid out. Right? And make an inventory list of all the assets. Now this is tangible personal assets. The jade bracelet, right? The diamond ring, the whatever has significant value. Now keep in mind, it's not only monetary value, it could be emotional value. Right? So if I'm the trustee and I have 6 siblings and I don't lock the house and things leave, that's my responsibility. Did you realize that? I'm responsible as a trustee to protect the house. Because nobody should be taking anything out the house unless all the beneficiaries agree. That's how you get family disputes. One sister said, hey, where's mom's jade bracelet? The other one said, well, that was, mom was going to give it to me before, but she didn't. And now what happened? It's gone. Now you have a family dispute. Right? A lot of the family disputes come about with real estate, number 1, personal items, number 2. Right? And a lot of it's just very emotional. Right? Because we all, if you think back, how many have siblings? Everybody have siblings? Many of you have siblings? Yeah. Back in the day, when you were younger, there were hurt offenses, right? We all remember those. You try not to think of them as adult, but when something happens that triggers you remember. Well, think of when mom and dad's gone, and now these things get triggered, right? And what happens? Your head goes to a bad space. What you focus on expands. You focus on a negative thing. All of a sudden, my brother is an evil person because back when we were 5, he stole my truck. Come on, really? But it happens because the emotions rise when somebody passes away. And we almost go to the fight or flight mode emotionally, right? When somebody, I lost my mom in September. My mom was 92. My mom and dad were married for 75 years together. My dad died 5 months later. He was heartbroken. Yeah. We were supposed to go to Vegas with him, and he didn't make that trip. But after my mom passed away, he was in Vegas every 3 weeks. Every 3 weeks. 93 years old, by himself. Yeah, and his wheelchair got stolen too. Yeah, it was horrible. It was horrible. And he kept going until at the end he got sick, and he said, I think I'm done. And he had a good life. Yeah, I miss him, but they left on their terms, and it wasn't a long battle. It was 7 days. They both, by the time they were in the hospital, the time they left us, it was 7 days. Exactly the same, both of them. And so it couldn't have, he had a chance to say goodbye to everybody. He wanted to sell his home, which we did. He wanted to give everybody money. It was closure. And that's what I realized. And in the end days, it's all about what does that person feel is important in regard to closure, right? And oftentimes, it's about making sure all their affairs are in order. Well, what things are in order that need to be the biggest things? It's usually the real estate, because it's the biggest thing people fight over, right? And that's what many people don't really have plans for. Number 14 is close all their email and social media accounts and website accounts, right? And we never had to say this 10, 15 years ago, right? And cancel all their club and organization memberships, right? Where are they members, right? And get a time of death appraisal. If they own real estate, and if you're planning not to sell the property within the next 6 months, I would suggest getting a time of death appraisal. Okay, what that is, it gives you the value at date of death, because there's a thing called a step up in cost basis, which means if mom bought a property at $25,000 and it's worth $1 million today, she kept it in her name until she died. If you're the trustee, you get it at a step up in cost basis, which means the cost basis went from $25,000 to $1 million. So if it's $1 million cost basis and $1 million value, is there any gain? No, there's no gain. Therefore, there's no tax on it. Okay, so that's called a step up in cost basis. Now, if somebody passes on their property while they're alive, we have a client yesterday we spoke to. Mom said just wanted to gift the kids the property already, so she gave it to her while she was alive. She bought it for $75,000. It's worth $1 million today. They're forced to do a 1031 exchange, otherwise they're going to pay $350,000 of capital gains tax. Yeah, and that's called a carryover in cost basis. So I tell people, if you like your kids, keep it in your name, because it'll be better for them, because they have more flexibility with their assets when you're gone, and they're not responsible for the capital gains tax. Okay. If you don't like your kids, keep it in your name. Because we've had people kick their family out, and now they have no assets, and now they're trapped. I had a client trapped in her own home. It was horrible. A lady came to one of our seminars. She said, Dan, I wanted your complete solution. I want to go to this retirement community. She was really excited, and I get there and I ask her, so wait a minute, who are these people on your tax record? Oh, that's my son, my daughter-in-law, and my son-in-law. And he goes, so I don't see your name on here. She said, oh yeah, I went downtown last year and I signed some papers. The kids had them transfer the property to them. She doesn't own it. She got stuck in her own home. Her kids trapped her in her own home. These kids that she worked hard all of her life to pay for their high school and college education, and they trapped mom in her own home, and it was horrible. I cried that day leaving that place because she got trapped in her home. She wanted to go to Ilima and Lahano, a retirement community, because the husband had dementia. They had memory care there. She got tired of taking care of him for 60 years. And now her dream of living a normal life was vanished because her kids made a decision that was not a good one for her. She ended up dying in her home. She couldn't move out of their home. And it was horrible to think that one opportunity of the good phase of life for her got taken away by her kids. And it was painful to see. It was really hard. Contact your CPA or accountant and make sure you get the tax returns. You're responsible for the tax returns. Taxes don't stop, by the way. Government is going to require you to get what they call an EIN, right? EIN number. Then you're going to file state taxes. Yeah, your job's not going to be done for a while, because the government's going to expect their money. Okay. Contact your financial planner or mom and dad's financial planner, whoever handled their assets, whether it be a bank, a financial planner, and find out, hey, here's the death certificates, how many do you need, and here's a trust document, and this is what the trust says, and so they will then distribute the assets, or at least make them available to the beneficiaries. Right. Contact a real estate planner like us to gather the property information and any kind of timeshare, any kind of real estate that you have. Know that you're either going to sell it, you're going to keep it and move into it, or you're going to rent it. Those are kind of most people's options, right? And so the question is, what's best for you? And you get to make that choice. What we do is we guide you through the pros and cons for all different routes. And you decide what you want to do. And we can help you in all of those areas. Communicate and educate and resolve disputes with beneficiaries. That's a tough one, because oftentimes there will be disputes between beneficiaries. The last item, number 21, is you distribute the assets. Typically, what we've seen is it typically goes in two phases. The first phase, you distribute some of it, but you keep enough, make sure that it covers any and all possible future expenses. So you don't actually close it until you make sure all of the accounts are closed. But at least you get your beneficiaries some of the assets that you know it's not going to jeopardize the other assets that they have, right? Based on the trust document. And there's a little cheat sheet here, and that's in your information there as well. So what is a real estate planner? We're kind of like a trust sales specialist, where we help people build, protect, and transfer wealth. And that's really important in today's world, because people are unfortunately making decisions that are not beneficial to them. the number one enemy to creating generational wealth is capital gains taxes. And as I said to you earlier in the other scenarios, these are people making decisions that they didn't consider capital gains taxes in their decision. You want to understand, what we do is understand your financial goals, your needs, and recommend solutions based on those goals. So we'll sit down, we'll talk about you and your family. What's important? You know, we're going to ask you about your kids. We're going to ask you about mom and dad. We're going to ask you about the properties you have, why do you have them, and then what we do is we measure each of the assets, right? We're going to basically let you know, if you think about it, real estate, there's only two types of properties, right? There's a property you live in and a property you don't live in, right? Can we agree to that? Property you live in, the property you don't live in. The property you live in, you should make an emotional decision on, right? Because you're living there. You're having a personal benefit from it, right? But if you don't live in it, what kind of decision should you make? Well, you should be making a financial decision, as if that's a stock or a bond or any other asset you own that is there designed to create a rate of return on your money, on your value, right? Well, that's where people get stuck, because there's hundreds of homes today that are vacant. Vacant. They're not doing anything with it, and people are sitting on millions of dollars of real estate, and yet they can't even buy food. And they have this asset, it's like a bank account sitting there, but they don't realize they can have access to it. They don't realize that that asset should actually be generating money, like a lot of money. And these things can change people's lives. Well, that's what we do. We help you analyze your investment properties. We show you how it's currently performing based on the information you give us. All we need is your income and your expenses every month, right? We run an analysis. We do a thing called an asset performance test. And what that does is it tests the performance of your asset. If you had $1 million in an asset and it's vacant, you could turn that into at a minimum $40,000 a year. At a minimum, bare minimum, $40,000 a year. And so in 5 years, what is that? That's $200,000. It's a lot of money. How long is it going to take you to save $200,000? You're never going to save $200,000. We have clients today that leave homes vacant for 5 years. Like, really. And it's painful to see. Okay. My suggestion is you think of it differently. You think of it as an asset that could benefit your family. What would that money do for your family, your kids, your grandkids? The ones that go to high school or college and they need money to pay for education, or you need money to pay for vacations, or you need money to pay for health care, right? You have it. Many of you have it already. And what we can do is teach you how to unlock it, right, to your benefit. And what we often do is we collaborate with financial planners, wealth advisors, CPAs, tax accountants, and in order to fulfill the instructions of the trust. We do that often. Many of the trust attorneys and CPAs and financial planners, we know because we've been doing this a long time, and so we typically meet together. We want to make sure that all of your trusted advisors are on the same page. Right? Nobody's doing anything that they shouldn't be doing. Everybody knows what everybody's doing, and everybody agrees that it's the best thing to do. Right? Then, if I had that environment, I'm going to feel more confident with the people around me. Now, if they don't agree, then there's something going on here. Right? There's something that doesn't sound right. And so we always recommend that. We support the goals of your related to your personal assets, what you want to do with them. In your home, I mean. So if somebody passes away, typically you have a problem. You have years of stuff, right? Call them lifetime of treasures, right? We all have clutter, right? Yeah, all those tofu containers, you know, those would be good one day, right? yeah, we all have those, right? And so coordinating the selling of the stuff, the moving of it, the donating of it, we can coordinate that to help get rid of the personal belongings that's stuck in the home, right? Because that's why people don't actually sell their home, or that's why people don't move, because they're tied to their personal belongings. By the way, all that stuff came in because you brought it in the house, right? It's like, who are you going to blame for that one, right? So yeah, supporting goals related to other real estate assets, depending on what your goals are. You know, we can help you relocate the asset, we can help you repurpose it, we can help you divide it or consolidate it. And we analyze the renting and selling or or allowing the family to use. These are your options. You have many options, but what most people don't realize is what their real options are. They think that there's really not very many options, and believe it or not, there's a lot of ways you can do this. We help people get their home ready for sale, to rent or to sell. We have been doing this a long time. We do construction management consulting, where we renovate, build homes. We have a contractor. I'm not a contractor, but we have a partner that we work with that can renovate homes. And so we do this all the time. If you ever want to see them, we've always got projects available to see. And understanding capital gains taxes and depreciation and investment strategies. One of the things that people say oftentimes is, well, I bought the property a long time ago and I never really appreciated it, so I must not have any tax on that. There's no gain on that. Well, there's one element that people always forget. It's a thing called depreciation. See, if you have an investment property, it's so weird. Does everyone know how the depreciation works? You want me to explain a little? So the way depreciation works is, think of it simply as the investment property you have rental income, okay? And that's called passive income. So you're getting passive income, you're charged a tax on that. Right? There's this other thing called depreciation. Depreciation is only applied to the improvement value of a rental property, not your personal residence, only an investment property. So the government came up with this idea that says that, your improvement on your rental property, it'll last you 27 and a half years. After that, you tear it down and you rebuild it. Nobody does that. We see homes in Hawaii. They're not that young, right? So what do people do? They fix it up, right? So, but what the government says is they're going to take that value and they're going to allow you to depreciate that value. So in Hawaii, most of the value of properties is in the land, right? And less of the value is in the improvements. So in 27 and a half years, if you have an investment property, you don't have any depreciation. What does depreciation do? It offsets dollar for dollar the amount of income that comes in, and it cuts out your taxes. So if you got $1,000 of income and you got $1,000 of depreciation, the $1,000 that came in has zero tax. Zero tax. But what happens if you have it greater than 27 and a half years? You don't have any left, right? That means you're basically netting 20 to 30% less money. Your net worth is not growing as fast as it could. And so depreciation is one element that investors don't consider because you don't see it. And people say, well, oh, that's okay because I didn't take depreciation. I said, well, it doesn't matter. Believe it or not, if your CPA didn't take it, bad on them, number one. And number two, bad on you that you didn't know, because they're going to charge you that depreciation anyways. So if you sell the property, they're going to charge you all that depreciation back. You have to pay it back. All the past of that tax, you're going to owe it back to the government. And so even if you don't have any capital gain, you could have capital gain tax because of the depreciation. You see what I'm saying? Now, if you have land, land's probably the worst thing to keep. Why? Because it has no improved value, right? Land doesn't have an improvement, therefore it has no depreciation. I'm told it's about a 20% net value to you. 20% is a lot of money, right? And that's something that most people don't understand and haven't grasped yet. But we talk about it because it's an important part of understanding building wealth and transferring wealth. Right? And then helping create generational wealth for your beneficiaries, for those that you care about. Right? Sometimes we have families doing generation skipping trusts, right? So older adult says, my kids are fine, I'm going to just pass it on because they have enough wealth and they have enough taxes to pay, but they're going to skip the generation and go to the grandchildren. Right? So it depends on tax strategies, what you would like to do. And it just depends on, how much wealth is there. So before you sell an investment or a property, you really want to know what your tax consequences are. So when you're selling a personal residence, something you lived in 2 out of the last 5 years, you get $250,000 capital gains tax exemption. A couple, married couple, $500,000 tax exempt. What does that mean? If I bought a property for $500,000 and I sold it at $1 million, I pay zero tax on that. There's no other asset that you own today that if you sold it, you could walk away with all the money. There is no other asset. Real estate's the last one you got until they change the law. And they tried to cut this back many times. I don't think they're going to win this one. And if it's beyond $500,000, you might pay capital gains taxes at 7.25% for the state government, up to 20% on the federal government. And if your adjusted gross income is greater than $400,000, you have a 3.8% capital gains tax on that. What are you looking at? That's close to 30%. Everything beyond $500,000. So some people say, well, I bought it so long ago, I bought it for $25,000, now it's worth $1.2 million. Okay. I have a lot of older folks that bought their home a long time ago. And what they tell me is, well, I don't want to sell my house because I got to pay the difference after $500,000. Let's say I got another $500,000 of gain. I'm going to pay 30% of tax on that. That's a lot of money. I don't want to do it. So they stay in their home. What they don't realize is there's a way you can combine tax laws. So this is the Internal Revenue Code 10, where do I say? What is it? 120, I'm sorry, 121, excuse me. 121. Our Internal Revenue Code 121 is this code here. You can also combine the 1031 exchange with it. And there's some guidelines around that. Number one, you move out of your home for 2 years. Right? So let's say you've owned it for a long time. You've lived in it these 2 years. I can't do this very well with 2 fingers. These 2 years, you move out and you sell it here. Right? So you can, on the other $500,000 of gain that you don't want to pay tax on, you move out for 2 years, you do a 1031 exchange with the difference. You pay zero capital gains tax. Okay. You keep it in your name until you die, you get a step up in cost basis, your family gets 100% of your wealth, not a fraction of it. Yeah. So there's many ways that we can create strategies for you around your real estate to transfer it, to protect it, and also to build it for future generations. Okay. Now, if you're selling an investment property, you're going to pay the capital gains tax at these rates as long as you've owned it for more than a year. And the way to defer that is a 1031 exchange. Right? That's how you defer it. And the way you eliminate it, it's really simple. Well, there's two ways to eliminate it. So number one, don't pay it. That's not a good idea. I wouldn't recommend it. If you have capital gains tax, you want to pay it. The view from inside the federal prison is not very pretty. Okay, so you don't want that view. The second is you die. I guarantee you all of you guys are going to do that, myself included. And so they have this term in 1031 exchange, and it doesn't sound really appropriate. I'll tell you anyways. It's called swap until you drop. Swap until you drop. You're going to keep doing 1031 exchanges until you pass away. Once you pass away, the kids get it at a step up in cost basis with zero capital gains tax. And that's how we help people build generational wealth. Okay? So how do you calculate capital gains tax? You take your net selling price minus the cost of selling, which is about 7% commissions in title and escrow, right? And then you have your adjusted cost basis, which is what you bought it for or the value that it was transferred to you at, plus any improvements minus depreciation. And you subtract those two, and that's your capital gain. So the step up in cost basis, we talked about that earlier, is a good thing because that means mom kept it in her name until she passed away. And when she passed away, the value stepped up to the market value. And if the cost basis is market value, there's no capital gains tax because there's no capital gain. This is the desired route to go, right? If you like money. This is one where it gets transferred while you're alive. So some people transfer it while they're alive. Why do people do that? Many people are told that you need to go on Medicaid. I'm not a fan of that unless you need Medicaid. But there's attorneys out there, there's businesses out there, there's people who do seminars out there that encourage people to do that. And my only question to them is, have you ever been where you're going to go in Medicaid? Where are you going to stay? Because the government's going to pay for your care. And that's why it's good, so to speak. But have you ever seen where they go? It's funny how God works sometimes. My first job out of high school, I was 18 years old. I worked at Malahia Hospital. Have you been to Malahia Hospital? It's a state hospital. It's not someplace you wish to go. The state's doing every best they can, but when you see people strapped to their wheelchair against the railing, yelling and screaming in their feces, you cry every day when you go home. That was me. 6 months I did that job. And I told myself as an 18-year-old, I'm going to do everything I can to make sure that people don't have to live this way. Everything I can. If you have the money to do it, don't live that way. Because it's horrible. There are people that have to live that way, and it's because they don't have means, and that's what it's designed for. But why are we playing a game with the government to give all your money away, all your assets away, to live like that? That doesn't make sense to me. And so I'm on a mission to stop that. If you have it, plan well so that you can live in the best life you can, not the least expensive life you can. Right? So how do you prevent family disputes with investment properties? And what are your options in dividing real estate? Right? So here's a quick example, and I've used this example for the past 15 years now. Common example is mom's a widow. Right? And mom owns $1 million apartment building, let's just say, or an asset of some type. It's an investment property. She doesn't live there. She doesn't even want it anymore, right? She's still got to worry about the tenants. She's got to worry about, the maintenance of it. The property is a problem and a burden. Cognitively, she's stressed physically about the structure. She's stressed about the tenants. She's stressed about the toilets, the tenants, the trash, all these things. And then she starts looking down the road and she sees, my kids, little Johnny, when I'm gone, he's going to screw this up. He's going to create a problem for his sister Jane. I know that because they already don't like each other, right? But they don't have a clue what to do. She comes to our class and she realizes that there is a better solution. There is a way you can create a plan. So she tells her kids, George, Lucy, Grant, Nan, let's go get together with these folks. They have something that they want to share with you. So we get them around in the family in a circle and we talk to the family and say, Mom's desires, when she's gone, she wants to pass it to you all. But here's the good news. When I asked Mom, does she need the money from the investment property to sustain the life she desires? She said no, she doesn't need it. In fact, she doesn't want it. So Mom wants to bless you today while you're alive, while she's alive. So what we're going to do is we're going to sell the $1 million asset. We're going to buy 4 properties of a value of close to $250,000. And here's what, guys, George, Lucy, Grant, and Nan, you get to predetermine your inheritance today. And you won't own it until Mom passes away because it'll stay in Mom's name. But you can predetermine it. And why is that important today? Because most of the kids don't want the apartment building in Mo'iliili. They want it in Washington, D.C. They want it in Seattle. They want it in Mililani, right? They want it where their kids are. So the plan of, I'm going to keep it for my kids, and my first question to them is like, do they want it? Did you have a conversation with them? Because 9 out of 10 times, they're going to tell you no, they don't want it. Okay? They don't have a desire to do what you did to build wealth. They have other plans. Right? So Mom sells it, she buys 4 properties. But the cool thing is George, Lucy, Grant, and Nan, their kids, are the ones that are selecting the replacement property. They're selecting their own replacement property. It could be any state in America. Right? George lives in Vegas. He just wants a condo for himself. But his property, he wants a really nice one. So he wants a $500,000 condo. Right? But he only has $250,000. So he can come up with his own money, or he can get a loan for the difference. And he can co-own it with Mom. That's called a mixed-use 1031 exchange. The mixed use is his primary residence for George. It's an investment property for Mom. Right? You can do those things. And you can defer the capital gains tax. See, today what happened is the kids, I call them kids because I'm going to be 60 this year, they might have good jobs, right? They might have good credit. They might have good income. What do they not have? Down payment. Kids don't save money. They're like water, pops out of the pocket, goes to the next. It's crazy. Today's kids, they don't see the future of saving money. We show them a chart of the principle of compounding. Let me just test you up. So here's a question. Let's say you have 2 people, one that's renting, one that's buying. They're paying the same amount of money every month, $2,200 a month. Okay. The one that's and by the way, this is the same unit. It's just that one's renting and one's buying. It's a $500,000 unit. Okay, this is a true story. So the guy who is renting, he's paying $2,200 a month, right? Put a deposit down, and in 30 years, what does he own? Nothing. He owns nothing. 30 years came and went, he owns nothing. The other guy who paid the same amount of money every single month for 30 years, except he got blessed by $100,000 on a $500,000 condo. Grandma blessed him with $100,000. The guy who bought, do you know how much he's worth in 30 years? $1.62 million. It's the principle of compounding. What happens is over time, if you take 4% every year, that number is going to get big enough that the 4% is a bigger number, right? And so you got a hockey stick like this, right? This, you know, think of Warren Buffett. That's what he made most of his money after the age of 50 because of time. And he started young, right? The principle of compounding matters, and that's what we teach the third generation. We're now working with grandma, the parents, and grandchildren today on a daily basis because we're helping create transfer wealth, creating generational wealth, helping kids understand how to build wealth, mechanics behind math of wealth, right? The impact of interest rates, the compounding principles. These are things that most of our young kids aren't trained. There's no class for this stuff, okay? We do it because we're in the business and we teach our kids this. You know, our youngest, our 21-year-old, he owns his first place. He's still in college. He made $50,000 in high school. And I told them all when they were in elementary school and middle school that your goal should be to own your own condo by the time you graduate college. He's the only guy that listened. He's going to be the guy that's going to have money. The other guys, I can't help them. You know, I can't help them. But the guys who understand these principles, time is your friend when it comes to building wealth. And it's not a microwave generation like the kids think. They think, oh, Bitcoin, let's throw the money in. And then all of a sudden, like the $30 Bitcoin is $26. How's that in building wealth, right? Anyways, bad story. Anyways, and so what happens is when mom passes away, it goes straight to the kids, tax-free. Tax-free. There's no capital gains tax. This is how you create generational wealth, right? And that's the end of our story today. So I'd like to open up with some questions, if you have any.